Good afternoon, all. We appreciate having so many people who have joined today's conference call on what is going to happen in the legislative session. Of course, if we knew that, you would see a crystal ball right here in front of you instead of Brian's water. We are happy to welcome all who are joining the call. I'm going to say just a few words of welcome to allow more people to join the call because we see a number of people in the queue and people are joining this call very, very quickly. So I will give a few beginning remarks before we get into the meat of the program to allow more people time to get into this call. This is a business academy, and I am Steve Roberts with the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. Seated to my left are Andrea Oxley, Caitlin Pitlack-Mora, and to my right, Brian Dayton and Lily Barrickman. We are looking forward to talking to you today about what we think could be happening in the legislative session that begins on Wednesday. We also are going to talk a little about the Chamber's agenda for the legislative agenda, and we're eager to have that conversation. We will be looking for raised hands and comments in chat, and we also are just finishing up a tour of West Virginia that has taken us to approximately 15 communities. We've been as far south as Williamson and as far north as Wheeling, and lots of points in between and east and west of those locations. We've heard lots from the employer community about what is really needed to supercharge and move forward West Virginia's economy. Speaking of West Virginia's economy, job creation has not been strong in the last 12 months. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, has issued its report now for November. We're still waiting to see December, but November's report is out. Workforce West Virginia has posted its report, which is driven from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. And what we've seen is a decline in employment in West Virginia over the last 12 months, from November of 24 to November of 25. While we have seen gains, very welcome gains, I might add, in healthcare hiring and construction hiring, the losses in the losses in manufacturing industry jobs, hospitality and accommodations, mining, those losses have offset the gains. So we have a net decrease in employment in West Virginia of 1,400 jobs from November 24 to November 25. Now, that sort of sets the tone for what Brian is going to talk about in terms of a legislative agenda from the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. We've had lots of people who have joined this Business Academy since I began speaking. So let's get started. And I want to introduce for the next several minutes Brian Dayton. So Brian, will you introduce yourself and take it? I do see people are still joining, so we'll say a few more introductory words just so that people do have time to get into this Business Academy. Brian, program's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve. And just looking across the list of people who are on this call, I know many of you, and I've had the pleasure to work with you. So this is my 14th legislative session coming up. You're never quite ready. And then I just realized we are 46 hours away from the start, but who's counting? It's kind of with the backdrop of what Steve just talked about in our jobs and employment numbers that has really been what we've been focused on in formulating an agenda, again, driven by our members, listening to them. What are their concerns? What are their needs? And so we have proposed several different pieces of legislation directly to the legislature, and we expect to see many of those bills running early in this session, and really in an attempt to make job creation more easy in West Virginia, to improve the livelihoods of our citizens, and just overall make this a better place to live, work, and raise a family. So I'm going to go down through some of those bills and just talk about them and give a little explanation about why they're important to the employer community. The first deals with our state's unemployment wage base. So every employer in West Virginia pays unemployment taxes on every employee that they have. And they pay those taxes currently on the first $9,500 of wages for every employee. The amount of they pay is based on that employer's experience rating. But our unemployment compensation fund has over $420 million sitting in it. And that is essentially dead money that is not being invested. It's just sitting there. Money goes in, money comes out as the unemployment system is utilized. Traditionally, that fund hovered around $200 million, but since COVID, we've seen it grow to $420 million. It is not tied to our general revenue budget. And so we've suggested take that taxable wage base from $9,500 down to $8,500. And then let's see where the fund goes. And then if we can cut further in future years, let's do so. That tax is especially felt by smaller businesses. If you're an employer who pays an average wage of $100,000, you're paying it on 9.5% of the wages. If you're a small business on Main Street who has part-time employees and you're paying them, let's say $20,000 a year, you're paying it on nearly half of their wages. So that's why it is a tax that is much more felt by our small businesses, but again, paid for by every employer in West Virginia. The next is our corporate net income tax. Many of you probably remember the push to lower the corporate net income tax back during the Manchin administration. Well, the 6.5% that we got to is no longer competitive. It's the 20th highest in the nation. Additionally, this is what I would consider to be a very volatile tax. We've seen years where the tax collections from our corporate net income tax are about $150 million. We've seen other years where it's close to $465 million. But that's a tax paid for by every C Corp in West Virginia and is something that any business looking are they going to expand operations, maybe new markets or expand existing markets, they're going to be looking, what is that tax rate? And so that is a tax that we've been talking to the legislature about. It's time to start making sure that we get that rate down and get it to where it is competitive with other states, because as of now, we're the 20th highest state when it comes to our corporate net income tax. Anyone operating in West Virginia also, I'm sure, is familiar with B&O taxation. Our B&O taxes, the rules for them have not been updated in close to 4 decades. And what has been found is that many different municipalities across our state don't have the expertise within on what is appropriate to be collected, how to collect that tax. But then also you find businesses that are in situations where different municipalities are coming seeking B&O tax for the same exact service. So we have proposed updating the rules related to B&O taxation in West Virginia. And unfortunately, that's probably going to take legislative action to trigger that. We've had conversations in the past with the tax department. Given that it has been so long, they do not feel they have the authority to open those rules back up absent the legislature directing them to do so. So that's a top priority. It's also a top priority for several members of the legislature who have firsthand experience with the frustrations when it comes to B&O taxation in West Virginia. So that's one that really I think will impact every employer in the state. We've done a lot on terms of legal reform since 2015. There were several places where West Virginia was completely out of step with the nation. And thanks to the work of several different members of the legislature, we were able to fix many of those glaring issues and bring our laws in line with other states. But there are still some areas where we are still very much out of step. One of them is the statute of limitations on written contracts. West Virginia's statute of limitations on written contracts is currently 10 years, and there are only 9 states, West Virginia included, that has that long of a statute of limitations. The vast majority of states are in the 5 to 6 year range. Last year, the Senate passed a bill that made it over to the House of Delegates, but then it languished in the House and didn't make it out. And we've said this is a very important issue. Again, this is dealing with whenever you discover that there has been a breach of a contract, that's when the statute of limitations begins to toll. And really our position is bring that lawsuit if you're going to bring it within 5 years rather than waiting up to 10 years. So we think that's a very reasonable position to be at. Again, the bill passed the Senate last year and died in the House. And so we've been talking to make sure that that bill receives priority this year. When it comes to shifting gears a little bit more towards the education front, when it comes to children and education and seeing what opportunities exist post public education, you pretty much have to fill out a FAFSA. That's the financial aid form. And you have to fill that out in order to even access funds such as the Promise Scholarship. Too many children in West Virginia do not have the knowledge, their families do not have the knowledge on how to complete the FAFSA. Last year, the chamber worked on a bill that essentially required every high school in West Virginia to require the high school to offer assistance for families in completing the FAFSA. It did not put any requirement on graduating or on graduation for those students, but just make sure that the high schools are doing what they can to get them to complete it if they would like to do so. Surprisingly, the bill was a bit controversial to some. It did pass the House on a 75-25 vote, but once it made it over to the Senate, it had no more action. So again, that's another one that we're continuing to talk about. This is really important for our children today to understand what opportunities exist beyond public education, whether that's higher education, whether that's going to community and technical school, whether it's the military, but really to understand what types of financial assistance may be out there, even promise or scholarships. You have to complete a FAFSA. Workforce is, as Steve mentioned, the Chamber and the Chamber Foundation have been traveling around West Virginia conducting Workforce Unifier events. Let's just put it simply, workforce is a major issue anywhere you go in West Virginia, and almost every one of our members is telling us that attracting and retaining employees is one of the most challenging aspects they face right now. We would like to look at what role Workforce West Virginia is playing in making those connections. The state puts a lot of money into Workforce West Virginia, but we hear a lot of frustrations is that we're not really getting the connection for those who are on unemployment right now or looking to enter the workforce on getting that connection to the employers that are available. So we've really proposed, let's take a look, complete overhaul of Workforce West Virginia to make sure that it's doing everything in its power to better link those who are looking for a job with those who are looking to employ people. And so that's one of the bills or resolutions that we expect will get a lot of discussion this year as well. Kind of following on the theme of workforce, childcare. Childcare is one of the biggest components of our lower workforce participation rate in West Virginia. Just to sort of set the stage, there were over 20 counties in West Virginia that have less than 100 childcare slots in the entire county. So those are considered childcare deserts. The Chamber came up with a bill in 2022 that provided a tax credit, a 50% tax credit for any business that starts a new childcare facility on their premises. And that bill has seen a good deal of success. We've seen several employers take advantage of it, and we now see childcare facilities that are up and running in West Virginia thanks to that tax credit being passed. We would like to expand that tax credit, but also offer a different tax credit for those employers who've already been doing it, because we know it is extremely expensive to operate these childcare facilities. And we want to encourage those employers to keep those operations going and expand them if possible. So we have two different bills specifically on the tax credits for employers operating childcare facilities. One of the things that has actually been tremendously successful this year is a program called TriShare. So West Virginia's Small Business Development Council received a grant from the Appalachian Regional Commission to do a TriShare pilot program in 8 counties in West Virginia. Wonder School, who spoke at the Business Summit this past year, has been administering that program, and we've already seen really good success at getting employers enrolled in this program. At its core, TriShare essentially has the employer pay for a third of the child care costs, the employee pay for a third of those costs, and then the state, and in this case for the pilot program, the ARC grant, come in and pay the other third. We would like to take that program statewide because we've seen such success with it early on in just those 8 counties in the capital region. And we said, let's make it available to all 55 counties so more employers can have that opportunity. Again, taking that cost down to a third is really very helpful to many, many families. The average cost of childcare is $800 a month per child. So if you can get that cost down to the $250 to $300 range, it becomes much more affordable to many more families and therefore makes it justifiable to enter the workforce versus the situation where many families are in right now, where honestly, if you look at the cost, you look at what you would make it going back to work, and you have families that are simply saying, all I'm doing is working to not see my kids. And so we're trying to go ahead and fix that part of the problem. The other issue The child care facilities themselves are not immune to the workforce challenges that every other employer is facing. And so we've proposed a bill called the West Virginia Teach Scholarship, where it would essentially make sure that the last dollar in funding is available for any child care worker to receive a higher education degree. Very similar to what was done, Mitch Carmichael's main bill, I believe it was in 2019, Senate Bill 1, where it said, go out, get the scholarships that are available. But in that bill, the state will come in and they'll pay the last dollars needed to make sure that you can go to community college. Using that same concept, we would like to apply that to childcare workers so that they can go and continue furthering their degree. So those are several of the bills that we have proposed directly. We also expect there are going to be several different pieces of legislation coming up this session that we will very likely be engaged in at a great deal. One of them is a bill coming up called Teams West Virginia. It's been announced by the House of Delegates about a month ago when they held a conference unveiling their jobs agenda. But Teams West Virginia essentially would model after Jobs Ohio, which essentially privatizes economic development. Right now, the economic development is subject to some political control. And the goal with that bill is to get it out of that control. We expect the bill is going to receive some very early discussion. And so we're going to be watching that one closely to see how all the different parties interact with that piece of legislation, because that would be a major change in how West Virginia undertakes economic development across the state. We also know the governor has been very high on a 50 by 50 energy plan. And the goal there is to have West Virginia generating 50 gigawatts of electricity by the year 2050. So what's important to understand is we have about 16 to 17 gigawatts of electricity being generated in West Virginia right now, or generating capacity, I should say. But we have no combined cycle natural gas power plants operating in the state. We have no nuclear power facilities operating in the state. So I was pleased a couple months ago, I had the opportunity to go up and participate in an announcement with First Energy for the new Harrison Power Station. We now have natural gas power plants on the board in West Virginia. So we're very excited about that. But that's going to be a major component of generating more electricity in West Virginia. We know the demand is going to skyrocket nationally with data centers, with AI. Electricity demand is going up significantly. In West Virginia, we truly believe that we can be an energy state or we can be a poor state. And we have a lot of energy here, and that's an opportunity for us to be in this game, helping provide power to the nation. The other thing that's going to be interesting is the governor's floated out. We're anxious to hear his State of the State address on Wednesday night, but he has floated out really two things. He would like to cut personal income tax up to 10% this session, and also go ahead and do a 2% spending cut across all agencies in West Virginia. We're really watching the reaction from the legislature on this bill, and we think the finance committees are probably going to be diving into this very heavily. West Virginia is currently on a glide path with automatic triggers to phase out the state's income tax. And I know the legislature spent a lot of time back in 2023 to figure that formula out and how to phase out the state's income tax. So I think they're going to be looking at it very, very carefully to see what can be done to make sure that we don't get too far too fast and end up in a situation where we're in a budget crunch in a few years. So I think the finance committees are going to probably have a lot of hard work in front of them looking at that proposal to see what's needed to see how far we can go on that cut. Now, I think last year, when we did our legislative recap, I think we were pretty direct with everybody that we spent a lot of time on defense. Last year, the Senate produced 13 bills that created a new cause of action, making it easier to sue employers in West Virginia. That was extremely disheartening to see that happen. But the makeup of the Senate largely has not changed. And so we are prepared that we could see several of those bills come back up this year in the Senate side. Now, what we are very proud of is that all of those bills died when they reached the House of Delegates last year. And so we're going to be watching those very, very closely. We also expect that the Senate may run a bill early on that would automatically raise electricity prices for every resident in West Virginia and every business in West Virginia. There's been a lot of talk by several senators about running a bill that would require coal-fired power plants to run continuously, essentially at 69%, or at least an average of 69% of the time. Otherwise, they wouldn't be available for rate adjustments. The problem with that is that it denies free market principles. When you have extremely cold days, a lot of times you can watch the markets and the price of coal is lower than the price of natural gas when it comes to generating electricity. And in those days, you see coal-fired power plants operating more. And in other days when gas is cheaper, those are the plants that are going to get called up first by PJM, our regional grid. Our strong belief at the chamber is don't get involved in the free market. Let the free market work and let it go ahead and work to provide the cheapest electricity available. So we expect that bill will run and may even have the votes to pass in the Senate, but we have been pretty publicly in opposition for that, and will continue to do so if that bill starts to run. Now, to some of the other things that we're watching to see. Again, I mentioned a few minutes ago, the governor is going to be giving his State of the State address Wednesday night. And that's where the governor, as most governors do, typically unveil their agenda and announce specific policies. So we're eagerly awaiting to see what the governor announces on Wednesday evening with that. There's been a decent amount of news made just over the past few days. Several members of the Senate, and we've been hearing this as well, that the Senate has not yet come to an agreement on an agenda for this year's session. So it's been interesting to watch just what individual senators are saying to the media, some of them very critical about just the process. On the other side of the building, the House of Delegates, they announced an agenda back in December that was very, very heavily focused on more jobs, better education, economic development. So we were very happy to see the tenor of the legislature change in that direction. We've been advocating all year to focus on jobs, economic development, better education outcomes, because those are the things that are going to really matter as we work to go ahead and make improvements in West Virginia. We also know, we kind of joke about it, right now we've all been talking about what's the issue that's going to dominate this year's session that nobody has an idea is coming. We don't know what it is, but every year inevitably there is that one issue that pops up that dominates a lot of the time of the legislature that nobody can predict on day one. And so we're just realistic that issue will come. We will find out about it as you all will find out about it. It almost happens like clockwork every single session. And then last, I think the thing that's going to go ahead and have a real impact just on the behavior of the legislature. Today was the opening date for candidate filing season, and candidate filing runs through January 31st. But legislators right now are finding out, do they have an opponent in this year's primary election or this year's general election? Are they going to skate free? What seats are open? That will have a tremendous impact kind of on how legislators interact. That if you don't have an opponent, you're a lot more freed up to do what you want to do. If you do have an opponent, it can have differing effects on you depending on which district you're in. So we're closely watching the candidate filings right now that's come in. Today was the opening day. It's going to go for the next 19 days. So that is something we're closely watching. I have a few other things that I will mention in a moment, but before I get there, I'm going to just go ahead and kick it back over to Steve for a second and open it up for any questions.
Brian, thank you. And as always, thank you for such a great overview. I thought I might just add to the conversation, since we began a little bit with noting that West Virginia has seen a decline in overall employment from November to November. And November 25 is the most recent month for which we have data. But another question would be, well, where is West Virginia doing a little better? Where are things going well? As a general rule of thumb, in just looking at the available data, the urban, what I would call the more urban corridors, are doing better. The Cabell, Putnam, Kanawha corridor has added employment. The Monongalia County, Marion Harrison corridor has added jobs. Jefferson County added jobs. However, Berkeley County lost jobs. Randolph County added jobs, but Upshur and Barber saw a decrease in jobs. Interestingly, Boone and Logan have had some small uptick in employment. So an uptick in especially deep South coal country is something that's interesting to note. Greenbrier County and Raleigh County have lost noticeable numbers of jobs. So one possible takeaway is that the more urban areas of the Cabell, Putnam, Kanawha corridor, the Monongalia, Marion, Harrison corridor are showing some growth. Jefferson County has shown growth in jobs. Ohio County has shown growth in jobs. but the more rural counties are, the more, as a general rule of thumb, the more rural counties are not performing well in job creation. Just a quick overview of not only what the jobs picture is, but where the jobs are being created. Brian, with that, I think we're getting close to the end. Want to see if anybody else at the table wants to add anything. I do not see any hands up or any comments in the chat. Brian?
I was going to say, I have a few more things I just wanted to remind everybody about. And so if you have a question, now's kind of your last opportunity to ask one. But just a few things to note. Our position papers have been uploaded to our website. And I just want to say, normally Kaylin George would be here to run through this part. Kaylin has an appointment this afternoon. She was unable to be here, and I promised her I will make sure that we talk about all of these things. But our position papers have been uploaded to our website. And the importance of those is that they are developed with the close communication from our members. And that's really what guides the Chamber's lobby team when we're over at the Capitol. When we start to get into issues, as legislators ask us, what do you think about this or what do you think about that? Those are really important for guiding us in understanding, how's that going to interact with the Chamber's overall mission. Next week, we have a legislative reception on Tuesday, January 20th, and it runs from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. at the Culture Center. Registration is available online, and so we'd love to have you there. It's a great opportunity. We have a tremendous turnout from the legislature, so it's a good opportunity to come see your delegates, see your senators, but also just other members of the business community. There's a strong turnout there as well. And the Culture Center in the evening with the background of the Capitol is absolutely stunning. Every day we have an email that goes out. Lily starts putting it together first thing in the morning, but it's our daily legislative agendas. So the legislative agendas are compiled and released every morning, and that's what tells anybody what bill is going to be on a particular committee. So Lily works every day to compile that list of every committee that's meeting in a given day, what items are on their agenda. If you would like to be added to that list that receives that daily legislative agendas, you can email Lily Barrickman at lbarrickman@wvchamber.com or Kaylin George, kgeorge@wvchamber.com, and we will be happy to add you to that. And then weekly, every member is going to receive kind of an updated bill tracker from the Chamber, all the different issues that we're watching. There's a written summary that comes out and talks about as well, just here's really what's happening underneath the Capitol. And then I will go ahead and usually do a video. Other members of our team sometimes jump in as well and do a video recap of what has gone on at the Capitol that week. So we produce those and we send those out to all of our members. I see actually we've had the opportunity, 2 questions have come in. So I want to take the first one from Sharon Campbell. The question says, Wetzel and Tyler counties essentially have no child care. Is there any discussion on helping in-home child care providers cut through some of the red tape?
And let me, if I may,
yes.
for just a moment, Brian, say thank you, Sharon Campbell at the Wetzel Tyler County Chamber of Commerce, a fantastic organization, so well led by Sharon. So Sharon, thank you for that. And hello and welcome to all the local chambers. This call has many, many local chambers participating. So hello to all of our friends and colleagues at the local chambers. Thank you for being part of this call. Brian, I interrupted you. Why don't you go ahead and...
Sure.
I would start by saying everything's on the table when it comes to child care.
Yes, and that has been a particular interest of the legislators that we've talked to, has been how do West Virginia's regulations compare to other states' regulations when it comes to child care? And that can be in a number of different ways. For example, one of the requirements we have, I think it's 12 or 18 inches of mulch have to be on a playground. And we've seen child care providers get cited if they have a little bit less than that number. I mean, is that a standard in every state, or is that something where we're out of bounds? What are the child care ratios? How do we stack up compared to other states? So I think having that conversation is extremely important. As actually part of that grant, I mentioned the Tri-Share bill. Wonder School is another aspect of what they're doing, is actually trying to help people start up more child care facilities, and that includes in-home child care. So if you have examples of individuals who are looking to start child care, especially in-home child care, or even through a business and they're running into a struggle, tell them to reach out to us, and we can probably put them in touch with somebody who can help them navigate that process, because that is absolutely important. The next question I see, Linda Tennant, can you provide a little more info on the electric increase bill? So sure. The bill that it was introduced last year, didn't get any traction, but has been getting a lot of talk this year in the Senate side, would essentially require coal-fired power plants to operate an average of 69% of the time. But the problem with that is the price of fuel differs. It goes up and down, just as any market situation would. So we have a regional grid to which West Virginia belongs to. It's called PJM. It's a 13-state grid. And PJM makes hour-by-hour decisions. They are forecasting what the energy load is going to be for 24 hours from now. And then they forecast it pretty carefully. They use weather models. They know what businesses are going to be operating, and they can get it fairly close in. And then different power plants essentially bid in to that process to produce electricity within that hour block. And it's going to depend on what's their fuel cost, of what can they produce that electricity at, what cost is it going to be, and plants bid in. So as an example, when we hit extreme cold last year, the price of natural gas jumped up above coal. And we saw coal-fired power plants were called up before natural gas power plants during that period of time. But if natural gas is cheaper than coal, you're typically going to see those plants bid in first. And again, we actually had the opportunity to tour John Amos Power Plant. It was really neat just seeing how almost within 90 minutes they can go from nearly idle to full power. And so they basically ramp those up and down. But coming in and demanding that they run 69% of the time is going to interfere with that free market. And that's where you're going to see distortions. What it would really do would be knock natural gas power generation offline, and therefore lead to higher electric bills. That's why, our position is pretty simple. Let the free market dictate on how those power is generated, and to go from there. Next question is, are there any discussions regarding the cost of living adjustments and locality pay? So we've been hearing some discussion on that to some extent with locality pay. What we have been hearing a lot of discussion when it comes to pay for state employees is our judges. We are, I believe, 52nd in pay for our judges, and their retirement system's in pretty bad shape as well. That bill actually ended up, some people got left out. The bill got vetoed after it passed the session last year. So I think you're seeing a real push from the circuit judges, family court judges, magistrates, and so forth on a bill to increase their pay. From the chamber standpoint, our belief is if you are ever in a courtroom appearing before a judge, that's probably one of the most impactful days of your life. And you want the most qualified individual sitting there. Like anything else, pay is going to matter on the ability to attract and retain quality judges. And so we've been very supportive of increasing judicial pay in West Virginia. We do think that's going to get a lot of discussion this year. And then, we're also hearing a lot of discussion from legislators about a teacher pay raise and trying to get teacher pay up to $50,000 a year. Again, we languish. We're dead last when it comes to teacher pay in West Virginia. And we are seeing the effects of that with over 2,000 certified teacher vacancies across the state. That means kids are not being taught by a certified individual within that field. We're having difficulty filling classrooms. So I think that's going to be another discussion point when it comes to teachers, state employee pay, judges, and so forth.
If I could just maybe add a word on the locality pay issue. What we've observed over time in the legislature is that locality pay is a difficult subject for a lot of reasons. One is, if I'm the legislator from an area who's maybe not getting a bump up in pay, I've got to go home and answer questions about why I might have voted for a pay raise for somebody other than my own constituents. And that's just one example. The other thing I would add is, I think there's always going to be discussion in West Virginia. Brian mentioned the need for more pay for teachers, or at least our ranking for teacher pay, for judicial pay. I think there's probably going to be more discussion around how to make PEIA more affordable for public employees, and how to move all pay levels up. And my guess would be that discussion would occur before there would be a discussion around locality pay. Now, one of the things we say around here is that we make predictions on days like today, and then we laugh at our predictions 60 days from now. So we'll see whether the things we've talked about turn out to be correct. But that's just another word on some of the challenge facing locality pay. I think, as an example, if we had something like an independent commission that recommended some pay levels, that might be easier for the legislature to support a report from an independent commission versus a bill that raises pay for somebody's constituents, but not for everybody's constituents. That's just a little more thought on the challenge around managing locality pay. I'm reading some of the other questions.
So our next question is from Tara Ellis. It says the duplicative licensing requirements between health departments and childcare licensing is very difficult. Also, modernizing the subsidy reimbursement system to an electronic system instead of paper and snail mail would significantly speed up the reimbursement for providers. Amen, amen,
Yes,
amen.
thank you, Tara.
That is a tremendous challenge to our childcare providers right now. We are using extremely antiquated systems. And the reimbursement when it comes to state subsidy has really been an enormous issue for the past several years now. It has been an enormous issue, putting a lot of pressure on our childcare providers. So absolutely, I know there's a lot of discussion related to that right now. But yes, hearing about the fact that you have childcare workers who are employers, I said childcare providers, sitting there every day, essentially having to fill out by hand and then mail that in order to be reimbursed for the children they're caring for. It's just incredible. It's year 2026. Last question I see right there. Is there any guidance on how businesses are supposed to handle pennies? So I've been asked this and can't find guidance. Round up or round down. Save your pennies. They might be more valuable in the future. So
that'll add to the penny shortage.
It probably doesn't help there. But as far as I know, it's kind of up to businesses. Steve,
I'll just offer. I was in a local hardware store. I try to buy local. I was in a local hardware store on Saturday, and they had a sign up on the cash register that all purchases would be rounded up to the nearest nickel.
Yeah.
Now I don't know that that's official guidance. That's just what I saw in a local store this Saturday.
I do know within my safe, I have some steel pennies, I have some wheat pennies. And so now you can probably collect the current ones, and one day, they too will have some interest. And we have one more question I saw come in. Many community and technical colleges in West Virginia are searching for solutions for childcare for our students, trying to get better jobs in education. Are there any discussions or partnership opportunities for bills to support state-funded colleges trying to address childcare needs? If TRISHARE were to apply to the colleges as employers, being asked to also have a 2% spending cut as a state agency would make it difficult. We see students each day struggling with childcare versus attending classes. It's a complex issue. Yes, it is. Depends. I think the answer would be depends on how the community college and community technical college is structured. Do they have a for-profit arm? Do they not? The reason I mention that, if there is a for-profit arm that's involved, there may be an opportunity to take advantage of the tax credit legislation that's currently on the books for starting up a child care facility. Like I said, we would like to broaden that tax credit and make it more generous to get more in there as well. Again, the TRISHARE, yes, that's a good point. That would be helpful, but if you're going to take a 2% cut, that's going to make it more difficult as well. So that's a great thing to think about. I appreciate that question because I think that's something for us to just think about too. Our community and technical colleges play a vital role in West Virginia, and just like going to a job, many of those students have children, and they've got to make sure those children are cared for throughout the day. So thank you, and that's worth us doing a little more digging in and some ideas on that.
And if I could add, and I don't want to delay this beyond what it needs to be, but I want to thank everyone, all of you, for the questions, those who've asked questions, and particularly the questions around childcare issues. Because sometimes we go to the legislature and we run into legislators who say, well, I'm not hearing that that's much of a problem, or I'm not sure that's the government's problem to solve. And our response to that is a little bit like, well, the 1880s must have been a good decade because a lot of our thinking seems to want to stay there. Had we not had public education that began for the most part in the 1880s, our country would not have been prepared for the 20th century. And so government responds to the needs of people and to the needs that are articulated by people. And I'm particularly grateful to those on this call who are raising the daycare issue because it reminds us of how much this is on the minds of the people whose membership we value and whose support we rely on to get things done at the Capitol. So thank you.
And I do not see any other questions. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And, as always, feel free to reach out, give us a call, send us an email as things arise. And we'll be sending out several briefings throughout the session. Make sure you stay up to date on what's happening here at the Capitol. Thank you.